so we need to make sure that the stitch length and the stitch width are set for straight stitch. And so what we want is we want a stitch width of 0 because there's no width in a straight stitch. So make sure your outer dial's on 0. Make sure your inner dial is standing straight up and down so that the needle's in the central position. And then move down to the stitch length, and you need to make sure that your stitch length setting is set on 3 millimeters. Once that's set, they're the settings for the straight stitch, and you'll be able to start. So what we'll do is we'll move over again to where the needle is, and I'm going to show you how to start some straight stitching. I'll just move the machine back a bit so you can see. When we sew from the edge of the fabric, we want to make sure that our seam, which is our row of stitching, is an equal distance, is an even distance from the edge of the fabric. And when I was learning as a child, no one ever told me this trick, and I used to painstakingly measure with a tape measure from here to here 1.5 centimetres or 1 centimetre depending on the size of the seam allowance, and then mark it with a pencil or mark it with pins, so I knew that I was sewing exactly 1.5 centimetres from the edge of the fabric or 1 centimetre. Well, there's a much easier way, and I wish my teachers had taught me this. If you look at the sewing machine down here, the metal plate that surrounds the needles, you can see a series of lines. Okay, these lines are exact measurements from the needle when it's in its central position. Okay, and what we're going to be doing is lining up the fabric with one of these lines and keeping it lined up so that when we sew, we know we're sewing an equal distance from the edge of the fabric down the whole length of the seam. Okay, so the first line measures exactly 1 centimetre from the needle when it's in its central position. Then they go up by 0.5 of a centimetre. So the next line is 1.5 centimetres. The next line is 2, 2.5, 3, and the final one's 3.5. Okay, it's the same on this side, but we're going to worry about using this side because what we want is the bulk of our fabric out to the side of the sewing machine, out here, so it's got plenty of space to move. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to sew a 1 centimetre seam allowance, which means we have to line the edge of our fabric up with that first line to the right of the needle. So to set the machine up in position, what you need to do is place your fabric, make sure you press the foots up, place your fabric underneath, and what you want to do is try and line the needle up with the top of the fabric, the top edge of the fabric, and you also want this edge of the fabric running down the 1 centimetre line. So we're going to start just in from the top there. Okay. What we're going to also do is, we've got the pedal on the floor, you're going to sew at a walking pace. Okay. The harder you press on the pedal, the faster you go. While you are learning to use the sewing machine and you're learning to control it, it's a bit like driving in that you have to start slowly. When you feel more confident, you'll be able to speed up a little bit. For the time being, we're going to be sewing very slowly. We hold the fabric at the side and down here at the front, away from the needle. Because once again, if you get carried away and you're not paying attention, you're in danger of your finger getting sucked in underneath that presser foot. So you have to be very careful. So we're going to hold the fabric because we need to be able to steer the fabric and keep it lined up with that first line to the right of the needle. Okay, so when we start, it's a good idea to hang on to your tail threads that are hanging out the back of the machine, just so they don't get tangled. I'm going to press very gently on my pedal, and we're going to sew forward 3 or 4 stitches. I'm going to stop, then I'm going to hang on to my fabric. I'm going to come over here to the back stitch dial. I'm going to hold it up, and for the whole time that I'm holding it up, I'll be able to sew backwards, and I'm going to sew back up to the top, and then I'm going to lower the press, reverse the back stitch dial, and I'm going to then just keep sewing and keep sewing forward. I'm going to go slowly. Just before I come to the pin, I'm going to take the pin out, get it out of the way. It's always better to do that. Let's move this back a bit. Then I'm going to keep hanging onto my fabric to the side and right down here to the front. And I'm not going to watch the needle because the needle knows what it's doing. What I need to do is watch this line here, and the edge of my fabric is lined up against that line the whole way. And if it's not, if I can feel myself coming off it a bit, I need to steer it back into place. Okay, so nice and slowly, walking pace, stop before you get to the next pin, take it out. Hang on to the fabric again, you need to go very slowly. Now, we're getting close to the edge of the fabric. What do I do now? What if I can't stop? Because I need to stop right at the edge here. What if I can't stop? What if I don't have that control? Well, this is where the flywheel comes in. And so you place your hand on the flywheel, and if you turn the wheel towards you slowly, what will happen is your machine will continue to stitch, and the feed dog will continue to feed the fabric through until you get to the end of the fabric. When you've done that, what we need to do is go back again. So we need to lift the back stitch dial, and we need to go back 3 or 4 stitches and then forward again to the end, and then we're done. Wind the needle using the flywheel out of the fabric, lift your presser foot, and very carefully release the thread. Now if it gets a bit caught, and sometimes it does, just use the flywheel and turn it slightly towards you, and what it will do is it will release your piece of fabric. You can take a pair of scissors immediately and you trim your end off. The other thing that you do is go back to the start here and you trim those threads straight off as well. Get rid of them. And you should have an evenly stitched seam with 4 back stitches at the start and 3 or 4 back stitches at the end, and it should look exactly like this. Okay.